The wet slap of a mop hitting concrete at 0527 hours echoed through the Naval Special Warfare Center like a punishment itself. The sound carried across the empty training compound, swallowed only by the distant crash of Pacific waves against Coronado's shore. In the pre-dawn darkness, Victoria Hayes worked alone, her movements efficient and precise in ways that no one watching would have recognized as anything other than janitorial routine. She was 34 years old, though the California morning cold made her feel older. At 5'5" and 135 pounds, she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of something other than civilian employment. But the Navy SEALs gathering for morning formation wouldn't have noticed. They never did. For 18 months, she'd been invisible. That was exactly how she needed it. The mop bucket scraped across the concrete as she repositioned, cleaning the same stretch of floor she'd cleaned yesterday and would clean tomorrow. Her dark brown hair was pulled tight in a bun that could have passed military inspection. Gray-blue eyes swept the compound in patterns that had nothing to do with looking for dirt. Exits mapped, cover positions identified, threat vectors calculated. Old habits died hard. Some never died at all. Her hands wrapped around the mop handle showed calluses that didn't come from cleaning. They came from rope insertions, from rifle work, from 11 hours of combat that ended with 4 flag-draped caskets and one survivor who couldn't figure out why she'd been the one to walk away. The sound of boots on concrete brought her head up slightly. Not the reaction of someone startled, the reaction of someone who'd registered the approaching footsteps 30 seconds earlier and had been tracking them since. Commander Drake Holloway entered the compound at 0545 hours with an entourage that announced itself through volume alone. 6 officers, all male, all carrying the particular arrogance that came with trident pins and combat deployments. Holloway stood 6'2", 215 pounds of what he clearly considered peak performance. Blonde hair in a high and tight cut. Blue eyes that held all the warmth of a tactical assessment. At 38 years old, with 16 years of service, Holloway had been passed over for promotion to captain twice. That kind of career plateau did things to a man's ego, made him look for places to assert dominance, made him notice the civilian contractor mopping floors at 0545 and see an opportunity. Victoria kept her back to the wall as she worked, a position that gave her line of sight to the entire compound. Military-grade boots on her feet, not the cheap civilian work shoes the other contractors wore. Dog tags created a slight outline under her long-sleeved shirt despite the California warmth that would hit 80 degrees by noon. Every detail wrong for someone whose badge read Facilities Maintenance. Every detail invisible to men who'd already decided she was beneath their notice. 40 SEAL candidates began assembling for morning formation, joining the officers already present. Phones emerged from pockets. The morning had that particular energy that came before physical training, when operators needed somewhere to direct their aggression before the workout channeled it properly. Holloway's voice carried across the compound with the projection of someone accustomed to being heard. Didn't know they contracted cleaning to civilians now. Budget cuts must be worse than I thought. Laughter rippled through the formation. Victoria continued mopping, her movements unchanged. The mop head made wet tracks across concrete that would dry in the morning sun and need cleaning again tomorrow. "Hey, civilian!" Holloway's boots appeared in her peripheral vision. "What's your call sign? Mop lady? Bucket queen?" More laughter. Phones lifted, recording. In 2024, humiliation required documentation, required witnesses, required proof that could be shared and reshared until the moment became permanent. Victoria said nothing. She repositioned the bucket, moved to a new section of floor. Her jaw was tight, the only visible indication that she'd heard anything at all. Lieutenant Junior Grade Brett Kowalski stepped forward, eager to join the entertainment. At 26, he was new enough to the teams that he still felt the need to prove himself through volume. "Commander's talking to you, ma'am." the honorific delivered with just enough sarcasm to make it an insult. Senior Chief Petty Officer Hugh Brennan completed the triangle, flanking her other side. At 42, going soft around the middle, he carried 20 years of service and 3 EEO complaints in his file that nobody had quite managed to prove. His career had plateaued at E8, would never make Master Chief, and he'd spent a decade blaming diversity initiatives instead of examining his own leadership failures. Probably applied to buds once, washed out week 1, couldn't handle the surf torture. The formation laughed again. Victoria's grip on the mop handle tightened fractionally. Knuckles firm, elbows at efficient angles. Anyone with experience would have recognized that grip. That wasn't how civilians held tools. That was a combat grip, muscle memory from 10,000 repetitions with different equipment. Master Chief Petty Officer James Whitlock stood 30 feet away, observing with the attention of someone who'd learned over 26 years that surfaces lied. At 48, silver-gray hair and a high fade, he carried the wiry strength of 185 pounds distributed across a 5'10" frame. He'd lost his daughter Emily to an IED in Iraq 3 years earlier, which had taught him to look past assumptions, to see what others missed. He was seeing it now. The way the civilian contractor had positioned herself with her back to the wall. The way her eyes tracked every person who entered the compound. The way she'd registered Holloway's approach long before he'd spoken. Those weren't civilian behaviors. Those were operator behaviors. Kowalski kicked the mop bucket. Not hard, just enough. Water sloshed across the concrete Victoria had just cleaned, spreading in a dark stain that reflected the overhead lights. "Oops," Kowalski said. "Guess you'll have to clean that again." 60 personnel now, formation swelling as more candidates arrived. Every phone out, every lens pointed at the civilian contractor who just had her work destroyed and was doing absolutely nothing about it. Victoria knelt, began mopping up the spilled water. Her movements were controlled, methodical. She didn't look at Kowalski, didn't look at Holloway, just cleaned the water with the same efficiency she'd shown before. Holloway crossed his arms, playing to his audience. "This is what happens when you don't have what it takes, gentlemen. Civilian work. Bet she couldn't do a single pull-up." Brennan grinned. "Couldn't handle a ruck march. Probably gets winded walking to her car." Victoria wrung out the mop, the motion precise. Her hands showed calluses across the palms and fingers. Not the calluses that came from mopping. The kind that came from fast rope insertions, from weapons handling, from the specific friction patterns that special operations created on human hands. Whitlock noticed, his eyes narrowed. He'd seen those calluses before, on his own hands, on the hands of every operator he'd served with across 2.5 decades. "Hey, civilian." Holloway's voice carried that edge that said he was done with the entertainment and ready to move to the next phase of his morning. "You ever wonder what it takes to be a real warrior? Nah, you wouldn't understand." Victoria stood slowly, bucket in hand. Her posture was perfect, not civilian perfect, military perfect. Spine straight, weight distributed, ready to move in any direction. She met Holloway's eyes for the first time. "No, sir," she said quietly. "I wouldn't." Her voice was steady, neutral, completely devoid of emotion. But the "sir" wasn't civilian deference. It was military protocol, delivered with the unconscious precision of someone who'd said it 10,000 times before in situations that mattered far more than this one. Whitlock's breath caught. That was a military "sir." That was the acknowledgement of rank from someone who understood rank. He stepped closer, watching the contractor's face. There was something there, something familiar, something buried under exhaustion and deliberate invisibility. The formation began to shift, preparing for the morning run. Holloway dismissed the contractor. "Tractor with a wave, already moving on to brief his officers." Victoria picked up her bucket and mop, heading toward the equipment storage. But Whitlock kept watching, kept seeing details others missed. The way she carried the bucket, weight distribution perfect despite the awkward load. The way she navigated through the crowd without ever turning her back on the group. The way her eyes swept the compound one last time before she disappeared into the storage facility. Those weren't the movements of someone who cleaned floors. Those were the movements of someone who'd operated in hostile territory and survived. The question was why someone with that kind of training was mopping floors at a naval special warfare facility at 05:27 in the morning while SEALs mocked her for entertainment. Whitlock intended to find out. Morning formation assembled at 06:12 hours with the precision of institutional routine. 180 SEAL candidates lined up in rows, their breath visible in the cool air that would burn off by 8. Victoria Hayes moved toward the compound exit, mop bucket in hand, her shift theoretically complete. Invisible again, safe again. Commander Holloway's voice stopped her before she'd made it 10 feet. "Where you going, civilian? Show's not over." She turned slowly. Holloway stood blocking the exit path, flanked by Kowalski and Brennan like some kind of tactical formation designed for harassment instead of combat. The crowd had grown. 60 operators and candidates now. Morning PT brief delayed for whatever entertainment the commander had planned. "I have other facilities to clean, sir," Victoria said quietly. Her gray-blue eyes stayed level, not challenging but not submissive either. The look of someone who'd learned that engagement only escalates situations. "Other facilities can wait," Holloway gestured toward the training area. "Since you're here, let me educate you on what real operators do. Consider it professional development." Kowalski grinned, moving to flank Victoria's left side. Brennan took the right. Not aggressive enough to be considered assault, just positioned close enough to make retreat require pushing past them, making her acknowledge she was trapped without anyone needing to say it. Candidate Melissa Mitchell stood in formation, third row, watching with increasing discomfort. At 24 years old, she was one of 8 female candidates in the current Buds class. She'd already learned that speaking up during moments like this marked you as someone who couldn't handle team dynamics, marked you as weak. But watching a civilian contractor get boxed in by 3 senior personnel felt wrong in ways that had nothing to do with tactical training. Master Chief Whitlock observed from his position near the instructor platform, arms crossed. He'd positioned himself deliberately to maintain line of sight on the contractor. Something about her stillness bothered him. Civilians confronted by multiple military personnel showed fear responses, nervous laughter, backing away, submission postures. This woman showed none of that. She stood centered, balanced, her weight distribution suggesting she could move explosively in any direction, despite holding a mop bucket. Holloway walked to the weapons rack, selected a training M4 carbine. Standard issue, cleared and safed for dry fire exercises. He carried it back to Victoria with the casual confidence of someone who'd handled rifles for 16 years. "Here's something educational." He extended the weapon toward her. "Hold this. Show me your ready position." Victoria hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap with only bad outcomes. Take the rifle and reveal training she shouldn't have, or refuse and face escalation. The math was simple and rigged. "Come on, civilian, it's not loaded, unless you're scared of an empty rifle." Holloway's tone carried just enough challenge to make refusal look like cowardice in front of 200 witnesses. Victoria set down the mop bucket, reached for the M4. Her hands found the weapon with the terrible familiarity of muscle memory that couldn't be hidden. Right hand on pistol grip, trigger finger immediately extended straight along the receiver. Left hand on handguard, support position perfect. Muzzle oriented in safe direction, slight downward angle. Buttstock positioned for immediate shouldering. Perfect low ready position. Not good, not competent. Perfect. The stance of someone who'd held this exact weapon system thousands of times under conditions where mistakes cost lives. The formation went quiet. Even the newest candidates recognized what they were seeing. That wasn't beginner's luck. That was ingrained training. Whitlock straightened, every sense suddenly alert. He'd taught weapons handling for 15 years. He could spot trained personnel from 50 feet away based on how they interfaced with firearms. This contractor had just demonstrated expert-level manipulation, the kind that came from intensive instruction and constant repetition. Holloway's smile faltered slightly. He'd expected fumbling, expected her to hold it wrong, maybe point it somewhere unsafe, give him reason to lecture about weapons safety and respect. Instead, she stood there looking like she could run a close-quarters battle drill without breaking stride. "Lucky guess," he said, recovering. "Probably saw it in a movie." Brennan picked up a dummy round from the training ammunition box, a double-feed malfunction trainer used for teaching weapons manipulation. "Let's see her clear a malfunction then." He tossed it toward Victoria without warning. She caught it mid-air with her left hand, eyes never. Air leaving Holloway, rifle still maintained in perfect position with her right. The catch was pure reflex, the kind of hand-eye coordination that came from reaction drills and combat conditioning. Catching objects without looking required spatial awareness and confidence that civilians simply didn't develop. The crowd murmured. Phones lifted higher, zooming in. This was becoming interesting in ways that morning formations usually weren't. Petty Officer Second Class Tyler Ortiz, 23 years old and fresh enough to still believe in doing the right thing, raised his hand slightly. "Commander, maybe we should—" "Shut it, Ortiz." Holloway didn't even look at him. "This is instructional." Victoria inserted the dummy round into the ejection port, locked the bolt forward to create the artificial double-feed malfunction. Then she cleared it. Tapped the magazine to ensure seating. Rack the charging handle 3 times with aggressive motion. Lock bolt to rear. Inspect chamber visually. Clear. Total time, 2.7 seconds. Whitlock had been timing it on his watch. SEAL standard for malfunction clearance was 4 seconds. She'd just performed it in 2.7, including visual inspection. His pulse quickened. Whoever this woman was, she'd received training that exceeded standard military qualification. "Fluke," Brennan said, but his voice carried less certainty. "Do it again blindfolded." Victoria handed the rifle back to Holloway. "I'd rather not, Senior Chief." The phrasing was perfect. Not "I can't" or "I don't want to." Just "I'd rather not." The response of someone declining optional activity, not someone incapable of performing it. And she'd correctly identified Brennan's rank without looking at his uniform insignia. Kowalski stepped closer. "What, scared we'll see you mess up?" "I have work to finish." Victoria moved to retrieve her mop bucket. Holloway grabbed her arm. Not hard, just enough to redirect her motion, just enough to establish physical control. She moved without thinking. Weight shifted to her left leg. Right foot stepped back into stable base. Her arm rotated inward, breaking his grip at the thumb, the weakest point of any handhold. Textbook defensive tactics. The exact technique taught in military combatives training for breaking wrist grabs. The movement took less than a second. By the time Victoria realized what she'd done, Holloway stood there with his hand empty and every person in formation staring at the civilian contractor who'd just executed a perfect tactical defense. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. "Sorry," Victoria said, quietly. "Reflex." Reflex. The word hung in the air like an admission of guilt. Reflexes came from training, from drilling techniques until they bypassed conscious thought. Civilians didn't have reflexes that broke military personnel's grips with textbook precision. Whitlock's mind raced through possibilities. Private security? Possible, but unlikely. Law enforcement? Maybe, but the weapons handling suggested military, not police training. Federal agent? Wrong posture, wrong movement patterns. That left one category: military. But what military personnel would be working as a civilian contractor mopping floors at Coronado? Before we see what happens next, if you've ever been in a situation where people underestimated you based on appearances, drop a comment below. Because what this commander doesn't know is about to cost him his career. Holloway's face had gone red. Whether from embarrassment at being disarmed by a female civilian or anger at being made to look incompetent in front of his formation, the result was the same. His ego demanded escalation. "You know what, civilian?" His voice carried the dangerous calm of someone whose authority had been challenged. "I'm making this official. You're going to demonstrate from my class what happens when unqualified people think they can play operator." He checked his watch. 0700 hours. Range. Be there. That's not a request. Victoria met his eyes. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear, not anger. Something closer to resignation. The look of someone who'd known this moment was coming eventually and had just watched the last exit close. "Yes, sir," she said. She picked up her mop bucket and walked toward the storage facility. Every operator in the formation tracked her movement. The way she navigated through the crowd without turning her back on Holloway. The way her posture stayed controlled despite obvious tension. The way she moved like someone who'd spent years in environments where situational awareness meant survival. Whitlock watched her disappear into the storage building. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a message to 3 contacts in naval intelligence. The message contained 2 words and a question mark. Ghost. Coronado? One of them would know. And if his suspicion was correct, Commander Holloway had just publicly challenged someone he had no business challenging. Someone whose presence at this facility in a contractor role made no sense, unless she was hiding. And if she was hiding, there was a reason. The kind of reason that ended careers for people stupid enough to expose it. The Naval Special Warfare shooting range sat 200 yards from the main compound, close enough to the ocean that the sound of waves competed with gunfire during qualification days. At 06:58 hours, the temperature held at 68 degrees with wind at 4 knots from the west. Perfect shooting conditions. No excuses. Victoria arrived still wearing her cleaning uniform, long sleeves despite the California warmth that would climb into the 80s by noon. She'd spent the past hour in the storage facility, sitting on a bucket, hands steady, breathing controlled, preparing herself for exposure she'd spent 18 months avoiding. The math was simple. Perform poorly and face continued harassment. Perform well and invite questions she couldn't answer. Either way, the invisible life she'd built was ending. 90 personnel had gathered by the time she reached the range. Word had spread through social media, text messages, the invisible network that turned minor incidents into base-wide entertainment. SEAL candidates, instructors, support staff, every phone out, every lens ready to document whatever happened next. Commander Holloway waited near the firing line with an M4A1 SOPMOD Block 2 carbine. The weapon represented current Special Operations Standard, 14.5-inch barrel, optic for precision work, surefire suppressor, PEQ-15 laser. He deliberately selected the most complex rifle configuration available. If she failed to manipulate it correctly, he'd have proof of incompetence. If she somehow succeeded, he'd still have established dominance by forcing her to perform on demand. "Here's the deal, civilian," Holloway's voice carried across the range with command projection. "You run our basic qualification course. When you fail, you apologize to every operator here for wasting our time, and you find employment somewhere else. Agreed?" Victoria said nothing, just looked at him with those gray-blue eyes that revealed nothing. Senior Chief Brennan stepped forward, playing his role. "And when she passes?" The sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. "She won't." Holloway's smile was confident. "But if by some miracle she does, I'll personally apologize for doubting her capabilities." Candidate Melissa Mitchell stood near the back of the crowd, arms crossed, deeply uncomfortable. At 24, she'd already learned that objecting to toxic behavior marked you as unable to handle team dynamics. But this felt wrong. Using range time to humiliate a contractor crossed lines that had nothing to do with training. Master Chief Whitlock positioned himself near the firing line, close enough to observe details others would miss. He'd received responses to his earlier messages. 2 had no information. The third had replied with a single word that made his blood run cold: classified. When naval intelligence classified information about a person's identity, it meant that person operated in spheres where exposure could cost lives. Victoria approached the rifle, inspected it with movements that spoke of ritual. Press-checked the chamber, dropped the magazine, verified round count, reseated it with a palm strike. Checked the optic mount for tightness. Professional pre-flight that every operator conducted before range work. Holloway watched her inspection with growing unease. She hadn't asked a single question, hadn't needed instruction on the weapon system, just performed checks like she'd done them 10,000 times before. "Range setup is standard qualification," Holloway announced to the crowd. 100 yards, 10 rounds, 5 shooting positions. Par time is 45 seconds. SEAL qualification requires 80% accuracy and completion under 50 seconds. Expert level is 100% accuracy under 30 seconds. He turned to Victoria. "Think you can handle that, mop lady?" The course was deliberately challenging. 5 positions meant 5 different body configurations: prone, sitting, kneeling, standing, and movement. Each required different muscle groups, different stability techniques, different aim points to account for height over bore. Standard military personnel trained for weeks to achieve passing scores. Excellence required months of practice. Victoria moved to the ready line, assumed a relaxed stance that somehow looked like it could explode into motion instantly. The rifle hung at low ready, muzzle oriented downrange, finger indexed along the receiver. "You can quit now," Holloway offered. "Save yourself the embarrassment." She didn't respond, just watched the range safety officer who would start the timer. "Shooter ready?" the safety officer called. Victoria nodded once. "Stand by." 5-second pause. "Go." She dropped to prone position in one fluid motion, rifle mounting to shoulder as her body hit the ground. The bipod wasn't deployed. This was unsupported prone, every ounce of stability coming from body position and bone support. 2 rounds center mass. The suppressor reduced the sound to sharp cracks instead of concussive blasts. Time, 3.1 seconds. She rolled into sitting position, legs crossed, elbows braced against knees. The position looked uncomfortable, unstable. But when she fired, both rounds impacted within inches of the first 2. Time, 4.2 seconds. Whitlock's jaw tightened. 7 seconds elapsed, 4 rounds fired, and she hadn't missed yet. This wasn't luck. This was fundamental marksmanship executed at a level he'd only seen from operators with years of experience. Kneeling position. Right knee down, left knee up, left elbow braced for support. 2 more rounds, same tight group forming on the target 100 yards downrange. Time, 3.8 seconds. Standing position. No support except body mechanics and breathing control. The hardest position because there was nothing to brace against. Every heartbeat, every breath created movement that translated to the rifle. She fired during the natural respiratory pause, the brief moment between exhale and inhale when the body went still. 2 more rounds. Time, 4.4 seconds. Final position required movement. She had to run 15 yards to a barricade, use it for support, and engage 2 final targets. She moved like water, rifle muzzle never sweeping anyone on the line, arriving at the barricade already in shooting position. 2 final rounds. Time, 5.1 seconds. Total time, 20.6 seconds. Half the SEAL qualification standard. A full 10 seconds under expert level. The range safety officer walked down range to retrieve the target. The crowd waited in absolute silence, phones recording every moment. When he returned, he held the target up for everyone to see. 10 rounds, single ragged hole. Every bullet within a 3-inch circle at 100 yards. Center mass, combat effective, perfect. The safety officer's voice carried disbelief. "That's a Navy marksmanship excellence score. I've been running this range for 15 years. I've seen that level of performance twice, both times from Master Chief instructors with 20-plus years of experience. Nobody spoke. The silence held weight, pressure building like weather before a storm. Holloway's face had gone red. "Lucky," he managed. "Wind was favorable." Lieutenant Kowalski looked less certain now. "Let's see her do stress shoot. Movement and timer pressure, multiple targets, real conditions." Victoria lowered the rifle, finger immediately indexed safe. "I really should get back to—" "What, scared to try when it's actually hard?" Brennan's voice lacked its earlier confidence. Whitlock stepped forward. "Commander Holloway, I think—" "You think what, Master Chief?" Holloway rounded on him. "That this civilian magically has operator-level skills? That's exactly what we're determining. Set up the combat course." Whitlock held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Aye, sir. Combat course, full configuration." As personnel moved to set up the shoot house, Victoria rolled her sleeves up slightly. The California heat was building, sweat forming on her forehead. Just an inch of fabric pulled back, enough to show the edge of a tattoo on her right forearm. American flag colors, part of what looked like a trident. Custom work, the kind that cost serious money and meant something specific. Whitlock saw it. His breath caught. He'd seen similar tattoos before, in photographs attached to after-action reports. The kind of reports that came from classified operations. The kind where operators got custom ink to commemorate teammates who didn't come home. Candidate Melissa Mitchell saw it too. Her eyes widened. She'd seen that exact style before, in her sister's footlocker, in the personal effects returned after Sarah Mitchell died in Kandahar in 2021. Her sister's commanding officer had worn similar ink, a trident with names woven through the design, a memorial that special operations personnel carried on their skin because some losses couldn't be commemorated any other way. Ortiz noticed Whitlock's expression. "Master Chief? You okay?" Whitlock couldn't answer, couldn't tear his eyes away from that partial tattoo. If he was right about what it meant, then Commander Holloway had just publicly humiliated and challenged someone whose service record was classified for reasons that had nothing to do with normal military operations. Someone who'd operated at levels where records got buried and identities got hidden. Someone who cleaned floors at Coronado not because she'd failed, but because she was trying to disappear. The combat course setup completed. 4-room shoot house. Multiple targets, hostile and civilian mixed. 200 yards of movement. Final precision shot at distance. The kind of course designed to test every skill a special operator needed under stress. Victoria stood at the start line, rifle in hand, looking at the course that would expose everything she'd been hiding for 18 months. Holloway's voice carried across the range. "Whenever you're ready, civilian, show us what you've got." She closed her eyes for just a moment. When they opened again, something had changed. The resignation was gone. In its place sat cold focus, the look of someone who'd stopped running from what they were and decided to show it. "Ready," she said quietly. The timer started, and Victoria Hayes disappeared into the shoot house like she'd been born there. The shoot house door closed behind Victoria with a metallic click that started the clock. The course was designed to break down combat scenarios into measurable segments: room clearing, target discrimination, movement under pressure, precision shooting at distance. SEAL standard completion time was 90 seconds with 95% accuracy and 0 civilian casualties. Commander Holloway's personal record stood at 76 seconds with perfect accuracy. He'd run this course 200 times over 6 years. Victoria had never seen it before in her life. Room 1 appeared through the doorway. 2 hostile targets positioned at angles, 1 civilian target between them. The scenario tested shoot-no-shoot decision-making under time pressure. Operators who moved too fast killed civilians. Operators who moved too slow got killed themselves. She entered with a tactical slice, body staying outside the fatal funnel while the rifle swept the space. First hostile identified. Double tap, 2 rounds center mass. Second hostile partially obscured behind the civilian. Controlled pair. Angled shots that avoided the non-combatant. Total time, 2.8 seconds. The crowd outside watched her progress on monitors connected to the shoothouse cameras. What they saw didn't match what they expected. She didn't move like someone figuring it out. She moved like someone who'd cleared 1,000 rooms under conditions where mistakes meant actual death instead of failed scores. Room 2 held 3 targets at severe angles. The geometry required repositioning between shots. The amateur approach was to stand in the center and pivot. The professional approach was to move, using angles to create clear lines of fire while minimizing exposure. Victoria moved. First target appeared, failure drill. 2 chest, 1 head. The drill had a name, Mozambique. Developed for situations where body armor or drugs kept threats fighting through center mass hits. It wasn't standard military training. It was special operations doctrine. Master Chief Whitlock leaned closer to the monitor. "That's force recon technique," he said quietly. "That specific shot pattern. The way she's moving through the room, that's not regular military. That's Tier 1 training." Second target, controlled pair, center mass. 4.1 seconds elapsed. Third target required transitioning around furniture while maintaining muzzle discipline. She flowed through the space like water finding the path of least resistance. Room 3 introduced low light conditions and required transitioning to sidearm. Victoria didn't carry a sidearm. She was a civilian contractor with a mop, not an operator with a full loadout. Lieutenant Kowalski, standing near the range office, unholstered his Sig Sauer M18. "She needs a pistol. Give her mine." He walked to the shoot-house entrance, handed the weapon through the access port used for passing equipment. Victoria accepted it without comment. Checked the chamber, verified magazine seating, tested the trigger pull. Professional pre-flight completed in 3 seconds. Then she entered room 3. The lights dropped to ambient only, simulating night operations. The targets were barely visible. She engaged 4 threats in 3.2 seconds, each shot placed with precision that suggested she was seeing things the cameras couldn't quite capture. When the lights came back up, every hostile target showed hits. Every civilian target was clean. Candidate Melissa Mitchell's hands were shaking. She'd watched her sister Sarah train for these exact scenarios before deploying to Afghanistan. Sarah had been good, very good. This contractor was operating at a level that exceeded anything Sarah had achieved. The question burning in Melissa's mind was simple and terrifying. Who was this woman? Room 4 presented the hostage scenario. A civilian target positioned directly in front of a hostile target, separated by maybe 7 yards. The hostile's head was partially visible over the civilian's shoulder. The shot required precision that pushed human capability. Even with perfect marksmanship, the margin for error was measured in inches. Victoria assumed a compressed ready position, rifle mounted tight. Her breathing slowed, became mechanical. The trigger press was so smooth that the rifle's report, it seemed surprising, even though everyone knew it was coming. 1 shot, single hole, the hostile target's head, the civilian target untouched. Time, 1.1 seconds from room entry to shot. The range safety officer watching the monitors shook his head. "That's impossible. That shot is physically impossible under time pressure." Whitlock said nothing, just watched as Victoria exited the shoot-house and moved to the 200-yard line for the final stage. His phone buzzed, a message from his naval intelligence contact. 3 words, "Stop this now." But it was too late to stop. 120 personnel were watching. Phones were recording. The moment had momentum that couldn't be recalled. The 200-yard target sat downrange, partially obscured by heat shimmer starting to build as morning temperatures climbed. Wind had picked up to 7 knots, quartering from the southwest. The shot required calculating elevation drop, wind drift, and leading the target if it moved. The range didn't provide ballistic computers or rangefinders for this stage. Operators had to calculate by eye and experience. Victoria didn't reach for the rangefinder offered by the safety officer, didn't ask about wind speed or direction. She just assumed prone position, rifle mounted, eye behind the ACOG optic. Her breathing steadied into the rhythm that snipers used, the 4-count cycle that created a natural respiratory pause. The rifle fired once. The sound echoed across the range, absorbed by the ocean beyond. No follow-up shot, no confirmation round. Just one pull of the trigger and absolute confidence in the result. The spotter behind the spotting scope called out immediately. Center mass, dead center, single hole. Total course time, 68 seconds. 100% accuracy, 0 civilian casualties. 22 seconds faster than SEAL standard. 8 seconds faster than Commander Holloway's personal record. The kind of performance that made it into the facility record book. The kind that got referenced in instructor courses as examples of excellence. The timer verification appeared on the monitor. Official, recorded, witnessed by over 100 personnel, and documented on dozens of phones that were already uploading to social media. Dead silence held the range for 5 full seconds. Then, someone in the back of the crowd dropped their phone. The clatter of metal on concrete sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. Victoria flinched. Not a startle response, a combat response. She dropped into a crouch, rifle coming up to ready position, eyes scanning for threats with the hypervigilance of someone whose nervous system was wired for survival. Her head swiveled, tracking the sound, assessing, categorizing, determining threat level. It took her 3 seconds to realize what had happened. 3 seconds to understand she just demonstrated a PTSD response in front of 120 witnesses. 3 seconds for her face to flush with embarrassment as she forced herself to stand, to lower the rifle, to remember she was on a range in California and not in an ambush in Kandahar. The crowd had seen it. The cameras had recorded it. That wasn't civilian behavior. That wasn't even regular military behavior. That was the reaction of someone who'd been in sustained combat, someone whose threat assessment protocols had been burned into their nervous system by experiences that rewired human psychology. Commander Holloway's voice came out rough. "Who the hell are you?" Victoria handed the rifle back to the safety officer. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was still elevated. "I told you, sir. I'm facilities maintenance." "Bullshit." Brennan stepped forward. "Civilians don't shoot like that. They don't move like that. They don't react like that." Kowalski's voice carried accusation. "She's gotta be stolen valor. Somebody call PMO. Get the provost marshal down here right now." Whitlock moved between the crowd and Victoria, his body language protective. "Commander Holloway, that tattoo on her arm, I need to see it, now." "Master Chief, this isn't," Holloway started. "Sir, with respect, I served with someone who had that exact ink. Same artist, same design. If I'm right about what it means, you need to stop this immediately." Victoria's hand moved unconsciously to her right forearm, covering the edge of tattoo visible below her rolled sleeve. "That's personal, Master Chief. It's not." "Please, ma'am," Whitlock's voice was gentle now. "I think I know what those names say. I think I know why you're here. And if I'm right, you shouldn't be hiding it anymore." The crowd pressed closer, phones lifted higher. Everyone wanted to see what the Master Chief was talking about. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, saw recognition in his eyes, saw understanding, saw the end of 18 months of invisibility arriving whether she wanted it or not. She rolled up her right sleeve slowly, revealing the full tattoo that ran from wrist to elbow. The trident was exquisite, rendered in black and gray with an American flag background. But woven through the design, integrated into the artwork like they were part of the structure itself, were 4 names in script lettering. CPO Jackson Reed, Kandahar 2021. PO1 Marcus Donnelly, Kandahar 2021. PO2 Tyler Hayes, Kandahar 2021. Whitlock's face went pale. "Operation Granite Shadow," he whispered. 5 went in, 1 came back. Victoria's voice cracked. 4 came back in caskets. I walked out. Melissa Mitchell pushed through the crowd, staring at the tattoo, at her sister's name, at the date she'd memorized, because it was. As carved on a headstone she visited every month. "That's my sister, Sarah Mitchell. You knew my sister?" Victoria turned to look at the young candidate, saw Sarah's eyes staring back at her, saw the family resemblance that made her chest tighten. "You're Mel. Sarah talked about you every night, said she wanted to make it home for your high school graduation." "She did," Melissa said, tears forming, "in a flag-draped casket." Hold on. Stop scrolling. What you're witnessing isn't just a comeback story. This is about legacy, loss, and why some heroes choose to disappear. Like and subscribe because what happens in the next 3 minutes will explain everything. The range had fallen into the kind of silence that felt physical, like atmospheric pressure before a storm broke. 120 personnel stood frozen, phones still recording, watching the civilian contractor with the memorial tattoo that told a story most of them had only heard whispered about in the special operations community. Operation Granite Shadow. The mission that didn't officially exist, but everyone knew had happened. The one where almost everyone died. Commander Holloway found his voice first. "You're saying you were part of that operation? The classified SEAL intelligence element in Kandahar?" Victoria pulled her sleeve back down, covering the names, covering the memorial she'd carried on her skin for 2.5 years. "I'm saying I clean floors, Commander. That's all you need to know." "That's not all I need to know." Holloway's voice carried an edge now, desperation mixing with authority. "If you're making claims about classified operations, I need verification. I need proof you're not stolen valor using dead operators' names for what?" Victoria's eyes locked on his. "For the privilege of mopping your floors at 0500? For the honor of being humiliated in front of your formation? What exactly do you think I'm gaining here, Commander?" Master Chief Whitlock stepped between them. "Sir, I'm recommending we contain this situation. Take it off the range, contact Naval Intelligence for verification before this goes any further." "It's already gone further, Master Chief." Kowalski gestured at the crowd. "Half the base just watched her run a course faster than anyone on record. That's on social media right now. You can't contain what's already public." He was right. Victoria could see it in real time. Personnel at the back of the crowd were typing on phones, sharing, posting, tagging. The video of her range performance was probably already spreading through military networks, civilian platforms, everywhere. The invisibility she'd maintained for 18 months was burning away in the California morning sun. Brennan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, face going pale. "Commander, we have a situation. NCIS just sent a base-wide alert. They're flagging social media posts from this facility for potential OPSEC violations. Facial recognition software matched someone in the videos to a classified operator profile." Whitlock closed his eyes briefly. There it was. The automated security system that monitored military social media for operational security breaches had just identified Victoria's face and connected it to her real service record. The record that Admiral Patricia Dalton had personally buried under classification protocols that should have kept it hidden indefinitely. Should have. Until 120 people recorded her face and uploaded it simultaneously, overwhelming the suppression algorithms through sheer volume. Victoria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to check it. She knew who was calling, knew what the message would say. Knew that her former commanding officer had just received an automated alert that her carefully constructed cover identity had been compromised. "Nobody moves," Holloway commanded. "Petty Officer Ortiz, get security to the range entrance. Nobody leaves until we sort this out." Tyler Ortiz, 23 years old and increasingly certain he was watching a career-ending disaster unfold, didn't move. "Sir, with respect, if this is a classified personnel issue, getting base security involved will escalate it beyond our authority to manage." "I didn't ask for your opinion, petty officer. I gave you an order." "Belay that order." Whitlock's voice carried the authority of 26 years of service and the rank to override junior officer commands when safety was at stake. "Commander, if this contractor's identity is classified and NCI is already investigating, the worst thing we can do is restrict movement. That turns a security investigation into a hostage situation." Holloway rounded on him. "Master Chief, you're overstepping." "Sir, I'm preventing you from making this worse." Whitlock's voice stayed level but firm. "If she's who I think she is, we just publicly challenged a decorated combat veteran to prove herself because you thought she was an easy target. That's already bad. Don't compound it by illegally detaining her." The sound of vehicles approaching made everyone turn. 3 black SUVs with government plates were moving toward the range at speed, dust trailing behind them. The lead vehicle had flags mounted on the front. Command flags. Admiral flags. Victoria's shoulders dropped slightly. She recognized those vehicles, recognized what their arrival meant. The sanctuary she'd found at Coronado, the anonymous existence she'd built cleaning floors and avoiding attention, was officially over. The SUV stopped at the range entrance. Security personnel emerged first, establishing a perimeter. Then the rear door of the lead vehicle opened. Rear Admiral Patricia Dalton. Dalton stepped out into the California morning. At 52 years old, she carried herself with the bearing of someone who'd commanded at every level, from platoon to task force. Salt and pepper hair cut short and professional. Steel gray eyes that missed nothing. Service khakis with ribbons spanning her chest, each one representing deployments and operations that had defined 3 decades of naval service. She took in the scene with a single sweep. The crowd, the phones, the range setup, and Victoria Hayes standing in the middle of it all, still wearing her cleaning uniform. Her jaw tightened. Commander Holloway moved to intercept, military courtesy overriding confusion. "Admiral Dalton, we weren't expecting—" "Commander Holloway." Dalton's voice could have frozen seawater. "Explain to me why my morning intelligence brief included an NCIS alert about a civilian contractor at this facility demonstrating expert-level special operations skills in front of 120 witnesses who posted it to every social media platform simultaneously." Holloway's face drained of color. "Ma'am, I was conducting a training demonstration. The contractor claimed competence with weapons and I was verifying—" "You were verifying nothing. You were humiliating someone you perceived as beneath you." Dalton walked past him without waiting for response. Her eyes locked on Victoria. Lieutenant Commander Hayes. The rank hung in the air like a detonation. Every person on the range heard it. Every phone recorded it. Lieutenant Commander. 04. A rank that required a decade of service and performance that exceeded standards. Victoria came to attention instinctively. Muscle memory older than her civilian cover identity. "Ma'am." Dalton closed the distance between them. For a moment, her professional composure cracked. Her hand came up to her chest, just briefly, before she forced it back down. "When you disappeared 18 months ago, we looked everywhere. I thought after the inquiry, after everything that happened, I thought you'd—" She didn't finish the sentence. "I couldn't do it anymore, Admiral." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "I couldn't put on the uniform, couldn't sit in briefings, couldn't look at operational maps without seeing Kandahar. I couldn't—" Dalton pulled her into an embrace. Completely inappropriate for an admiral and a lieutenant commander in front of 120 enlisted personnel and junior officers. Completely necessary for 2 people who'd survived something that broke most of the people who lived through it. When Dalton released her, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steel. "Commander Holloway, front and center." Holloway moved like a man walking to his own court-martial. "Ma'am, explain to me why you detained Lieutenant Commander Victoria Hayes." Dalton's tone suggested there was no good answer, but she was offering him the chance to try. "Admiral, there's no record of her in the system. Her badge says civilian contractor, facilities maintenance. She has no identification showing military service. I had no way of knowing because I personally buried her service record after Operation Granite Shadow." Dalton's voice carried across the range, ensuring every witness heard this part. Heard it clearly enough that there would be no confusion later about what had happened and why. After she spent 11 hours behind enemy lines extracting intelligence that prevented an embassy bombing. After she carried 2 wounded operators 4 kilometers under fire. After she watched her brother die in her arms because I sent them into a compromised situation based on faulty intelligence. The crowd's reaction was visceral. Gasps, whispers, the sound of realization spreading through 120 people simultaneously. Dalton continued, her voice harder now. After the Department of Defense inquiry cleared her of any wrongdoing, she requested discharge. I denied it. She requested transfer to non-combat duty. I denied it. I was so concerned with keeping my best operator that I ignored what the mission had done to her. So she did what I should have let her do 18 months earlier. She disappeared. And I helped her because after what I put her through, I owed her that much. She turned to Victoria. "You chose Coronado?" "I wanted to be near the teams," Victoria's voice was steadier now, "near people who understood what it cost. But I needed to be anonymous. I just needed to fade away." Dalton faced Holloway again. "And you decided to humiliate her publicly? To challenge a decorated combat veteran to prove herself to you? To force her to demonstrate skills that would inevitably expose her identity?" "Admiral, I had no way of knowing her background was classified. I had no clearance for—" "You had every responsibility to treat a civilian contractor with basic human respect, Commander. You failed." Dalton's attention shifted to include Brennan and Kowalski. "All of you failed. And now Lieutenant Commander Hayes' cover is blown, her privacy is violated, and her service record is compromised because you needed to feel superior to someone you perceived as weak." Admiral Dalton's command voice carried across the range with the weight of absolute authority. "All personnel, outdoor amphitheater, emergency formation in 15 minutes. This is not optional." The crowd dispersed quickly, moving toward the designated assembly area. Phones disappeared into pockets, suddenly aware that recording further might constitute an OPEC violation that would end careers. Commander Holloway, Senior Chief Brennan, and Lieutenant Kowalski remained frozen near the firing line, understanding that their presence was specifically required. Victoria stood beside the Admiral, still in her cleaning uniform, feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. For 18 months, she'd been invisible. Now, 300 personnel would assemble to hear her story, her failures, her losses. Everything she'd been running from would be laid bare under California's sun that felt too bright, too revealing. Master Chief Whitlock approached Dalton, saluting crisply. "Ma'am, request permission to escort Lieutenant Commander Hayes to the amphitheater." "Granted. Stay with her, Master Chief. She's going to need someone who understands." Dalton's eyes held meaning that Whitlock recognized immediately. Someone who understands what it means to lose people you were supposed to protect. By 0825 hours, the amphitheater was packed. 300 personnel from across the Naval Special Warfare Center had assembled, filling concrete benches in neat rows. Word had spread beyond the range. The entire facility knew something significant was happening. The air held tension like static electricity before lightning struck. Victoria stood at ease beside the Admiral's podium, eyes forward, posture military perfect despite the civilian clothes. Her breathing was controlled, measured, but her heart rate was elevated. 300 faces, 300 witnesses to the story she'd spent 2.5 years trying to forget. Admiral Dalton stepped to the podium. Her voice carried without amplification, decades of command presence making technology unnecessary. What I'm about to disclose is partially classified. You will not record, photograph, or discuss outside secure channels. Violation will result in immediate investigation and prosecution under the Espionage Act. Is that understood? A chorus of acknowledgments rippled through the amphitheater. Lieutenant Commander Victoria Hayes graduated from the Naval Academy in 2012, top 10% of her class. Selected for Intelligence Officer program, she completed SIR Level C training and qualified as a survival expert. In 2017, she volunteered for a classified pilot program integrating female officers into Naval Special Warfare intelligence units. The crowd was silent, absorbing information that contradicts everything they thought they knew about the woman who'd been cleaning their facilities. In 2018, she completed a modified basic underwater demolition SEAL training course as part of that classified program. She graduated with a class standing of 7 out of 64 candidates. Dalton let that sink in. A woman graduating Buds S in the top 12% when the overall attrition rate exceeded 70%. Victoria's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back where the formation couldn't see. This was worse.
Then combat. In combat, you could shoot back. From 2018 to 2021, Lieutenant Commander Hayes served with a classified SEAL element conducting sensitive intelligence operations. Her element completed 47 successful missions over multiple deployments. She earned a reputation in the special operations community as one of the most capable intelligence officers in naval special warfare. Dalton's voice hardened. In December 2021, her 5-person element was tasked with Operation Granite Shadow. Their mission was to extract a compromised intelligence officer from Kandahar province. The intelligence we provided was faulty. Our source was compromised. The element walked into an ambush. Victoria's breathing became labored. The amphitheater walls seemed to close in. 300 faces staring, 300 witnesses to her failure. Whitlock noticed immediately. He stepped closer, positioning himself just behind her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his presence without being crowded. "Ma'am," he said quietly, just for her. "5 things you can see. Name them." A grounding technique. Standard protocol for PTSD episodes. She focused. Podium. Flag. Concrete. Sky. Whitlock's boots in her peripheral vision. Her breathing steadied fractionally. Dalton continued, unaware or choosing to push through. 4 operators were killed in action. Chief Petty Officer Jackson Reed, Petty Officer First Class Marcus Donnelly, Petty Officer Second Class Tyler Hayes, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Mitchell. Candidate Melissa Mitchell, sitting in the 3rd row, felt tears streaming down her face. Hearing her sister's name spoken aloud in official capacity, attached to a combat operation that had never been publicly acknowledged, broke something inside her that had been carefully held together for 2.5 years. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was shot twice, sustained shrapnel wounds, but maintained command. She called in air support, provided covering fire while extracting wounded personnel, and secured the intelligence that 3 other agencies had failed to obtain. That intelligence prevented an attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kabul that would have killed over 200 American and Allied personnel. The Admiral's voice carried weight that transcended military rank. This was personal. For her actions, she was recommended for the Silver Star, Purple Heart, and Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V. The Silver Star was approved 8 months later, in August 2022. By then, she'd already disappeared. Victoria's vision tunneled. The amphitheater was too bright, too loud, too full of people who were learning things she'd never wanted shared. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe properly. Whitlock spoke again, quiet and steady. 4 things you can touch. Name them. belt, fabric of her shirt, dog tags under her collar, ground beneath her boots. The panic receded slightly. Not gone, but manageable. The Department of Defense conducted an inquiry into the operation, Dalton continued. Some politicians wanted a scapegoat for the losses. They questioned Lieutenant Commander Hayes's command decisions. They suggested that having a female operator in a leadership position had somehow compromised the mission. Anger flickered in Dalton's eyes. The inquiry exonerated her completely. Blame was assigned to intelligence failure at multiple levels, including my own. But the damage was done. Lieutenant Commander Hayes requested discharge. I denied it. She requested transfer to administrative duty. I denied that too. Dalton's voice softened, carrying regret. I was a selfish commander who couldn't accept losing my best intelligence officer. So I kept her on active duty while she stopped sleeping, stopped eating, started having panic attacks during operational briefings. I watched her break and told myself she'd recover, that she just needed time. Victoria's eyes closed. Hearing it spoken aloud, hearing her weakness exposed to 300 personnel, felt like being flayed. Finally, I made a choice I should have made 6 months earlier. I offered her a deal. I would classify her service record under a limited access program, create a civilian contractor identity, and allow her to choose any assignment she wanted with the understanding that she could return to active duty at any time. Dalton looked at Victoria. She chose Coronado, chose to be near the special operations community, chose to serve by maintaining the facilities where the next generation trains, chose anonymity over recognition, chose healing over career. The Admiral's attention returned to the formation. I'm telling you this because you deserve to understand what happened here today. You deserve to know that the woman Commander Holloway humiliated, the woman he challenged to prove herself, is someone who has already proven more than most of us ever will. She paused, letting silence hold weight. And you deserve to understand why some warriors choose to fade away. Not because they're weak, not because they failed, but because they carried weight that would have crushed people who never had to lift it. Melissa Mitchell stood suddenly, unable to remain seated. Admiral, permission to speak. Dalton nodded. Granted. My sister was Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Mitchell. She was 26 when she died in Kandahar. Melissa's voice shook but held. I've blamed Lieutenant Commander Hayes for 2.5 years. I read the inquiry report summary, the unclassified parts. It said mission success, but my sister came home in a casket, so how was that success? Victoria turned to look at Melissa directly for the first time since the amphitheater had filled. Their eyes met across 30 feet of concrete and 2.5 years of grief. Last month, the full after-action report was declassified, Melissa continued. All 200 pages. I read every word. I learned that Lieutenant Commander Hayes was shot twice before she returned fire, that she carried my sister 200 meters to the extraction point while still engaging enemy combatants, that she called in danger-close air support that almost killed her too. Tears ran freely down Melissa's face now. I learned that my sister's last words were recorded by the helmet camera. She said, "Tell Mel I made it. Tell her I was with the best. Mel is me." My sister knew she wasn't going to survive, but she wanted me to know she wasn't scared because Lieutenant Commander Hayes was there. Victoria's composure shattered. The tears she'd been holding back for 2.5 years, the grief she'd been burying under 18 months of mopping floors, came out in a sob that echoed across the amphitheater. Melissa walked down to the formation floor, walked straight to Victoria, and wrapped her arms around her. "I'm sorry I blamed you. I'm sorry I spent 2 years hating you for bringing my sister home. She was proud to serve with you." Victoria held the younger woman, both of them crying, both carrying loss that would never fully heal, but could maybe, eventually, be shared instead of carried alone. The morning arrived with fog rolling off the Pacific, thick enough to obscure the training compound until the sun burned through around 800. Admiral Dalton had established her temporary office in the base commander's conference room, windows overlooking the same ground where Victoria had mopped floors 24 hours earlier. The view felt different now. Everything felt different. Commander Drake Holloway stood at attention before the desk where Dalton reviewed his service record on a tablet. Beside her sat a JAG officer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Morrison, who'd arrived from San Diego specifically for these proceedings. The presence of legal counsel made everything official, made consequences permanent. Commander Holloway, you are here for administrative review of your conduct regarding civilian contractor Victoria Hayes on April 23, 2024, Dalton began formally. You have the right to counsel. Do you wish to exercise that right? No, ma'am. Holloway's voice was steady, but his face was pale. He'd spent the previous night reviewing every regulation he'd violated, every protocol he'd broken. The list was extensive. The charges are as follows: conduct unbecoming an officer, harassment of a civilian contractor, abuse of authority, and creating a hostile work environment. All of this was recorded and disseminated via social media, creating public relations issues. Issues for Naval Special Warfare Command and potentially compromising classified personnel. Dalton looked up from the tablet. How do you respond? No excuse, ma'am. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Lieutenant Commander Morrison made notes. Commander, walk me through your decision-making process yesterday morning. Holloway took a breath. I saw a civilian contractor in a space I considered exclusive to operators. I made assumptions based on her position and gender. When she demonstrated competence I didn't expect, my ego interpreted it as a challenge rather than an opportunity to reassess my assumptions. I escalated when I should have de-escalated. I forced a confrontation to assert dominance I had no right to assert. That's an accurate self-assessment, Dalton said coldly. Recommended punishment. Letter of reprimand to be filed in your permanent record. Removal from command screening list. Mandatory reassignment from Coronado to Surface Warfare School Newport as an instructor. Mandatory equal opportunity training and 6 months probation. One additional incident of any kind results in immediate administrative separation. Do you understand these terms? Holloway's career had just been capped. No command. No promotion to captain. Assignment to a schoolhouse where his operational experience would be wasted teaching surface warfare officers basic tactics. But he'd keep his rank, keep his retirement, keep the uniform. It was mercy he didn't deserve. I understand, ma'am. I accept the punishment. You're getting this chance because Lieutenant Commander Hayes advocated for you. Dalton's voice carried an edge. She argued that you didn't know her real identity and that punishment should fit the offense you were aware of committing, not the one you accidentally committed. That level of grace from someone you humiliated should teach you something, Commander. It does, ma'am. Dismissed. You have 72 hours to transfer your duties and report to Newport. After Holloway left, Senior Chief Hugh Brennan entered. At 42, with 20 years of service, he had less room for error. His record showed the 3 EOO complaints Dalton had mentioned, each one formally filed but never quite proven. Pattern of behavior was harder to hide when compiled in a single document. Senior Chief Brennan, same charges as Commander Holloway, with the additional charge of destruction of property and a documented history of creating hostile environments for junior personnel. Dalton's voice was harder now. How do you respond? Ma'am, I didn't know she was military. I thought, I don't care what you thought. I care what you did. You kicked over her equipment. You participated in public humiliation. You've done this before, according to your record. 3 complaints in 6 years. None proven, but all ill-credible enough that someone documented them. Morrison consulted her notes. Senior Chief, you're eligible for retirement in 2 months at 20 years. Recommended action, letter of reprimand, reduction in rank to E7, and mandatory retirement at your 20-year mark. You'll retire as a Chief Petty Officer, not a Senior Chief.
Your pension calculations will reflect E7 pay grade. Brennan's face went red. Admiral, I have a family. That pay reduction? Should have considered that before you spent 6 years harassing junior personnel. Dalton's tone allowed no negotiation. You're getting to retire, Senior Chief. That's more than you deserve. Accepted or contested? Brennan's jaw worked. Accepted, ma'am. You have 48 hours to clear the base. Dismissed. Lieutenant Junior Grade Brett Kowalski entered last, and his youth worked against him. At 26, he had no track record of good behavior to balance against this incident. He was simply a junior officer who'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Lieutenant Kowalski, same base charges as the others, plus assault for grabbing Lieutenant Commander Hayes' arm without consent. Dalton studied him with the expression of someone deciding whether salvage was possible. You're the youngest here. Tell me why you did it. I wanted to fit in, ma'am. Kowalski's voice broke. I'm new to the teams. I saw senior personnel behaving a certain way, and I thought that was the standard. I thought harassment was part of team culture. I was wrong. Yes, you were. But you've identified the actual problem. Dalton leaned forward. Toxic culture perpetuates because junior personnel see senior personnel modeling bad behavior. You broke that cycle yesterday by being honest just now. The question is whether you learned from it. Morrison read from her tablet. Recommended action. Letter of reprimand. Mandatory transfer from Coronado. 6 months probation. Mandatory EEO and leadership training. Assignment to Naval Special Warfare Group 2, Virginia Beach, where you'll work under commanders with zero tolerance for the behavior you demonstrated. I accept, ma'am, and I'd like to apologize directly to Lieutenant Commander Hayes if she'll allow it. That will be her decision, not mine. After all 3 had been processed, Victoria was asked to attend. She entered wearing Navy PT gear for the first time in 18 months, the fabric feeling simultaneously foreign and familiar. Admiral Dalton gestured to a chair. They've been formally disciplined. Holloway is reassigned to Newport. Brennan is reduced in rank and forced to retire. Kowalski is being transferred to Virginia Beach. Dalton watched Victoria's reaction. You advocated for lighter punishment than I wanted to give them. Why? Because punishment doesn't teach as well as grace sometimes, Admiral. Admiral. They made mistakes. Bad ones. But destroying their careers won't undo what happened. It'll just create 3 bitter veterans who blame the system instead of examining themselves. You're kinder than I would be. I've made leadership mistakes too, ma'am. Mine cost 4 lives. If I'd faced the harshest possible consequences for every error in judgment, I'd never have had the chance to learn from them. Dalton was quiet for a moment. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, I'm giving you a choice. Return to active duty as an instructor here at Coronado. No deployments, no combat operations. Just teaching the next generation. Or maintain your civilian status with full understanding that your cover is blown and anonymity is impossible now. What do you want? Victoria looked out the window at the training compound, at candidates running morning PT, at the facilities she'd cleaned for 18 months while hiding from the person she used to be. I need 48 hours to decide, ma'am. You have them. That afternoon, Petty Officer Tyler Ortiz was called to Dalton's office separately. The 23-year-old had no idea why until he stood before the Admiral's desk. Petty Officer Ortiz, you attempted to intervene yesterday when senior personnel were engaged in harassment. You spoke up despite being ordered to stay quiet. That takes moral courage. Dalton's expression softened slightly. I'm recommending you for accelerated promotion board and assignment to instructor staff. Your evaluation will reflect that you displayed the leadership we claim to value, but rarely reward. Ortiz's eyes widened. Ma'am, I just did what was right. Victoria, sitting in the corner where Ortiz hadn't noticed her, spoke quietly. That's exactly why you're being recognized. Master Chief Whitlock received his own meeting later that day. Dalton got directly to the point. You recognized something was wrong early and tried to prevent escalation.
You also identified Lieutenant Commander Hayes before anyone else. How? The tattoo, ma'am. I'd seen similar memorial ink on operators who'd lost teammates. And I served with Chief Reed's cousin. I knew about Operation Granite Shadow from someone who'd been part of the recovery team. You tried to warn Commander Holloway and he ignored you. Yes, ma'am. That failure of leadership on his part reflects well on you. You're now Senior Enlisted Advisor for this facility, effective immediately. Your job is to ensure what happened yesterday never happens again. Think you can handle that? Whitlock nodded slowly. I can, Admiral. But I'll need Lieutenant Commander Hayes's help. The best way to prevent this is to teach why it matters. That requires someone willing to tell their story. Dalton looked at Victoria. That's her decision. 5 weeks passed before Melissa Mitchell requested. Melissa stood a formal meeting with Victoria. They met at the memorial wall where Sarah's name was engraved alongside hundreds of other Naval Special Warfare personnel killed in action since Vietnam. The brass plate read simply, LTJ Sarah E. Mitchell, 2021, Kandahar Province. Melissa stood 3 feet away, arms crossed defensively. I've spent the last 5 weeks watching you teach, watching how you prepare candidates. You don't sugarcoat anything. You don't promise glory. You just prepare them for the worst. Victoria said nothing, letting the younger woman work through whatever she needed to say. That's what Sarah needed, someone who told the truth instead of selling heroic fantasies. Melissa's voice was steady now. Will you train me the same way you trained her? Your sister was a better operator than I'll ever be, Melissa. I can teach you tactics and protocols. She taught me courage. 6 weeks after the range incident, Victoria Hayes arrived at the Special Warfare Training Compound at 05:27 hours, the same time she'd arrived every morning for 18 months. But everything was different now. She wore Navy PT gear with an instructor tab sewn on the left chest. No cleaning supplies, no mop bucket, just a clipboard with training schedules and a radio clipped to her belt. The invisible contractor was gone, replaced by Lieutenant Commander Hayes, Naval Special Warfare Intelligence Instructor. 180 SEAL candidates assembled for first formation of a new training block. They'd all heard the story by now. Social media had ensured that. The video of her range performance had been viewed 3 million times before Naval Special Warfare Command convinced the platforms to remove it for OPSEC violations. But screenshots lived forever. Her story had become legend before she'd agreed to step back into the uniform. She walked to the front of the formation, standing beside Master Chief Whitlock and 3 other instructors. The candidates fell silent, watching the woman who'd somehow become both cautionary tale and inspiration in the span of 6 weeks. Candidates, this is Lieutenant Commander Hayes. Whitlock's voice carried across the compound. She'll be your Naval Special Warfare Intelligence Instructor for the next 6 weeks. You will treat her with the respect her rank and experience have earned. Is that understood? A unified response, yes, Master Chief. Victoria stepped forward. This was the first time she'd addressed a formation since Kandahar, the first time she'd stood in front of future operators and been responsible for teaching them how to survive what she'd survived. Her hands wanted to shake. She forced them still. I'm not here to teach you how to shoot, she began, voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her chest. You'll have plenty of instructors for that. I'm here to teach you how to think. How to make decisions when the intelligence is wrong, when your teammates are dying, when command is asking for answers you don't have. She let that settle, watching faces in the formation. Some were cocky, certain they'd handle pressure better than whoever had failed before them. Some were uncertain, already questioning whether they belonged. All of them were about to learn lessons that couldn't be taught in classrooms. Some of you will wash out of this program. That's not failure. That's self-awareness. Not everyone is meant for this work. Some of you will graduate, get assigned to teams, and never see combat. That's not failure either. That's luck. And some of you will find yourselves in situations where no training fully prepares you, where you make the best decision possible with the information available and people still die. Melissa Mitchell stood in the front row, third from the left. Her eyes never left Victoria's face. In the 5 weeks since their conversation at the memorial wall, something had shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, more like shared understanding of what loss cost and what honor demanded. "That's not failure," Victoria continued. "That's war, and it will haunt you for the rest of your life. My job is to give you the tools to make those impossible decisions. Your job is to stay humble enough to keep learning." She paused, scanning the formation. "Some of you are here for personal reasons, family legacy, proving something to yourself or others. That motivation will get you through Hell Week, but it won't sustain a career. You need to find purpose beyond yourself, beyond revenge or validation or pride. Find teammates worth fighting for. That's what will bring you home." The formation was absolutely silent. This wasn't the motivational speech they'd expected. This was reality, delivered by someone who'd lived it and carried the scars to prove it. Training began at 0600. Victoria ran them through intelligence analysis scenarios that had no clear answers. Situations where every choice carried consequences, and hesitation killed just as effectively as wrong action. She pushed them not on physical capability, but on decision-making under pressure, on learning to accept that sometimes there were no good options, only less catastrophic ones. By 1800 hours, when the training day ended, half the candidates looked shell-shocked. They'd signed up for physical challenges and tactical training. Victoria had just introduced them to the psychological warfare that special operations demanded. Melissa approached after formation dismissed. "That was brutal, ma'am." "It's supposed to be. Better you learn here that combat doesn't care about your feelings than learn it downrange where mistakes cost lives." Victoria's voice softened slightly. "You're—"
Her sister understood that. She never complained about hard training. She complained when training wasn't hard enough to prepare her for reality. She wrote about you in her letters home. Never used your name, just called you the commander. Said you were harder on her than anyone else. I was, because she had the capability to be exceptional if someone pushed her past where she'd push herself. Victoria's throat tightened. I pushed her right into Kandahar. No, ma'am, you prepared her for Kandahar. There's a difference. That afternoon, Commander Drake Holloway appeared on the Coronado facility one last time before transferring to Newport. He'd spent 6 weeks processing his reassignment, clearing his office, and preparing for a career that would end at his current rank teaching surface warfare officers instead of leading SEAL operators. He found Victoria in the instructor office reviewing training assessments. He knocked on the doorframe. "Ma'am, permission to enter?" She looked up, surprised. "Granted." Holloway stood at attention. "I'm transferring to Newport tomorrow. I wanted to apologize directly before I left. What I did was inexcusable. I let ego and prejudice override basic decency and leadership. You deserved better." Victoria set down her pen. "Commander, you didn't know my background. The punishment should fit what you actually knew, which was that you harassed a civilian contractor. That's serious, but not career-ending. It should have been career-ending, ma'am. I demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership that undermines unit cohesion and drives good people away from service. You're right, you did. But you've spent 6 weeks acknowledging that instead of making excuses. That's character development. The question is whether you continue developing or whether this is just performance to minimize consequences. I've been reading everything I can find about female integration in special operations. The actual studies, not the political commentary. The data is overwhelming. Performance standards don't care about gender. Combat doesn't care. The only things that matter are capability and character. So why did you spend 16 years believing otherwise?" Holloway was quiet for a moment. "Because it was easier to blame external factors for my career plateau than examine my own leadership failures.
Easier to resent change than adapt to it. I wasted a decade fighting progress instead of leading through it. There's an instructor slot opening next month in maritime operations. Pay is lower than command. Prestige is non-existent. But you'd be teaching candidates actual skills instead of pushing paper at a schoolhouse. Victoria leaned back in her chair. If you're serious about changing, that's where you prove it. In the work, not the talk. I'll apply today. Thank you, ma'am. After he left, Master Chief Whitlock entered. You just gave him a career lifeline. I gave him a chance to prove he meant what he said. That's different. Victoria returned to her assessments. People can change, Master Chief, if they want to badly enough. Your brother Tyler, the name on your tattoo, he was your actual brother? Victoria's pen stopped moving. Yes, 2 years younger. Wanted to be a SEAL since he was 10. I tried to talk him out of it. Why? Because I knew the cost. I'd already paid it. Didn't want him to. Her voice was quiet now. But he said, Vic, you taught me that service means sacrifice. I can't ask you to bear that alone. So I recommended him for selection, trained with him, deployed with him, and buried him. Whitlock sat down across from her. My daughter Emily wanted Army infantry. I said no. Pulled every string to get her assigned to support roles. She died anyway. IED on a convoy route. Doing a job she didn't want because I was protecting her from the job she did want. I'm sorry, Master Chief. You gave your brother the gift of choosing his own path. That's love. I denied my daughter that choice, and she died resenting me for it. Your way was better. They sat in silence for a moment, two people who understood that some losses never heal, but could be carried with less pain when shared. 8 weeks into the training block, Victoria's teaching style had become legendary on the base. She didn't yell, didn't use intimidation, just presented scenarios so realistic that candidates who failed them understood viscerally why the training mattered. Her class had an 89% pass rate, the highest in 5 years. Melissa Mitchell scored in the top 10% of intelligence curriculum assessments. Tyler Ortiz, promoted to E6 and assigned as Victoria's assistant instructor, showed natural talent for teaching that surprised everyone, including himself. Victoria had moved into instructor quarters on base, a small room that held a photo of her team, Sarah Mitchell's last letter framed on the wall, and dog tags displayed on her desk. She'd established routines: 0500 PT, 0600 training prep, 1800 gym, 2100 phone calls with her PTSD support group. Sleep came easier now, 5 hours most nights instead of 3. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. Progress wasn't linear, but it was progress. On a Thursday evening in June, Admiral Dalton visited Coronado for a routine inspection. She found Victoria in her office after hours, reviewing lesson plans for the next day. You're still here at 2000 hours? Yes, ma'am. Preparing tomorrow's scenario on multi-source intelligence fusion. Dalton sat down uninvited. Any regrets about saying yes to this job? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Every day, but not about. Out the decision. About the cost, the price we pay to be here. Those candidates out there think they understand. They don't. Not yet. But when they do, when they face their own granite shadow moment, they'll have the tools to survive it, and they'll know someone who lived through it is waiting to help them process it. You're not trying to save them from the trauma. You're teaching them how to carry it. We all carry something, Admiral. I'm just teaching them how to not carry it alone. The next morning arrived with coastal fog and temperatures in the low 60s. Victoria reached the training compound at 0527 hours, the time that had become ritual. But now she arrived as an instructor, not a ghost trying to disappear. New candidates were assembling for their first day, 180 personnel who had no idea what the next 6 months would cost them. Victoria stood in front of them, no longer invisible, carrying a mop and bucket she'd retrieved from the storage facility. She set them down in front of the formation. First lesson, candidates. There is no job beneath you, no task that's not worth doing right. The person cleaning this compound last year was a decorated combat veteran. You will treat every person on this base with respect, regardless of their role, because you never know who's been through hell and chose to come back to teach you how to survive it. She picked up her clipboard. Now, let's get to work. The camera pulled back, sunrise over Coronado, waves crashing against the shore, a new generation beginning the journey that would define their lives. Victoria's voice carried across the compound, steady and sure. My brother Tyler used to say, "Legacy isn't what you accomplish, it's what you teach others to accomplish after you're gone." He was right. This is how we honor the ones who didn't make it home, by making sure the next generation does. If this story moved you, if you've ever served or known someone who served, or simply believe in honoring those who sacrifice, leave a comment sharing your story. Subscribe because we're telling more stories of real heroes who choose service over recognition. And remember, the person next to you might be carrying more than you can see. Treat everyone with the respect they've earned, not the status they display. This story is fiction, but represents the experiences of thousands of female service members integrating into combat roles since 2015. As of 2024, women serve in all combat specialties, including Naval Special Warfare, Army Special Forces, and Marine Raiders. Operation Granite Shadow is fictional, but the sacrifice is real. Over 180 female service members have been killed in action since 2001. Their legacy continues in every woman who chooses to serve. For those who carry the weight, you are not alone.